Stop longing. You poison today's ease, reaching always for tomorrow. Robin Hobb, Fool's Errand. You're listening to AMI Audiobook Review on AMI Audio. I'm Jacob Shymanski. That was a quote from Robin Hobb, who I think has some of the most beautiful prose in the game right now. She's a fantasy author that I will be featuring a little later on. I'll explain in what faculties we're going to be doing that. But Ramya Amuthan is with me too. What did you think of that quote, Rams?
That's a nice one.
If you
It's
need
basically,
to,
yeah.
if you need to like boil it down to something else, it's don't kill my vibe. Why you?
Oh, that's what you boiled it to. I was
If
like,
you're
live in the
wo-
present.
Yeah, it's like live in the present, but stop whinging and worrying about tomorrow. You gotta live in the now. But it's just the way she wrote it. I love that quote. What are we doing today?
I just love the word ease.
Ease.
When the word ease is used, it's so, it's just so understandable. No further explanation needed. Well, it's
Well,
nice.
let's ease into today's topic. What are we doing?
Yeah, we're doing, actually, this is your idea, so I'm not sure why you've tossed it over to me, but read and tell,
Well, I
right?
gotta make you do something.
Okay, thanks. So read and tell is an idea you put in the bucket list of things to try, and we will be doing it with other people eventually, but we're test running it today. And essentially, we pick some themes or, fill in the blank here, and then we stand by the books that we fill in the blanks with. So we have to come to the defenses of our own choices. And I'm sure we'll give each other a hard time because that's what we do here on the show. So read and tell. It's like show and tell, but what did you read / listen to?
Yeah, it's like book recommendations based on prompts. You don't just tell me, recommend me something. It's recommend me something based on this and this and that. And I kind of stole the idea from a subreddit called Suggest Me a Book. And people go on there and say, recommend me a book for a 17-year-old that hates writing and loves that hates reading and loves dinosaurs. And then people are like, oh, actually I have the perfect book. Like it's all based on those types of prompts. And when you get the right recommendation at the right time, and I know you're susceptible to this, Rams.
Yes.
You just
Thank you.
cannot help yourself but to pick it up. And I hope that we do this on this show because I think recommendations are a big part of what we want to do here.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say there are lots of ways to recommend books, and we don't know what'll hit or, how it hits people. So it's going to be interesting to do it this way because I just think it's fun to answer prompts, almost like the first answer that comes to your mind, Like not even necessarily the one you've thought about the most, which, we do. We do
Don't
think about our
overthink it.
answers.
Don't
But
overthink
yeah,
it.
if you didn't overthink it, what would be the first thing? And that's kind of the thought-provoking part of the prompts, at least. We picked some good ones.
Yeah, I think so too. And you can come up with hundreds of prompts like these. So what's the first one?
Okay, so the first one is the best recommendation I've gotten in a while is Jacob.
I want to say The Wager by, what's his name? By David Gran. This was a nonfiction book that retells the story of a shipwreck, a possible mutiny, and the story of how they got back to England afterwards. It's a nonfiction that's based on sea logs, which is basically the diaries of sailors that they would keep. And every day they would just write, here's what happened on the ship today. And like sometimes they would write with a lot of description. And the book actually excerpts a whole bunch of these sea log entries. But what Gran does with this book is it takes together the sea logs of tons of sailors that were on this expedition from the UK all the way to Patagonia, which is the southern tip of Argentina, to piece together what happened on this doomed expedition, because a ship ends up hitting shore and crashing, and a whole bunch of sailors end up on an island off the coast of Argentina. And it's told in a way that it feels, sometimes you forget that it's nonfiction and it just feels like an adventure story, but it's all based on bits and pieces of these sea logs that sailors wrote back in the 1740s. And the cool thing is that it's like a murder mystery and that you don't really know what exactly happened. Because if I were to give a synopsis, there was this expedition of 5 or 6 ships that went from England, and they were supposed to patrol the western shore of South America. So that means you need to go by Patagonia, the southern tip of Argentina. Once they got to that strait, just south of Patagonia, it's some of the most dangerous waters in the world. One ship crashed, the Wager, and then a bunch of sailors ended up on this desolate island just off the mainland.
Whoa.
A couple months later, 40 or so survivors got on a ship that they made out of the wreckage of their old ship. Like they completely rebuilt the
Oh.
ship and then I want to say sailed, but they barely sailed it. They basically rowed from the southern tip of Argentina all the way to Brazil for 3 months. And then once they got there, they said that, oh, we're survivors and we went through this whole ordeal. And then they went back to England and it ended up being this big story of survival and resilience. And it was a big story in the UK and in the kingdom. But then a couple months later, there were 3 more survivors that landed in a town in Chile. And they ended up making their way back to the UK. And it was the captain of the ship. Now what happened is the captain said, all those 30 survivors, they're actually mutineers and traitors. And the 30 mutineers had their own reasons for doing what they did. And now, even today, you still kind of have to piece together who was right. Whose account do you trust? We don't really know.
And that's
what
the
happened.
plot. Like that's the
That's the plot.
actual part of it. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
You get a whole picture of this journey and Grant does a really good job at pointing out the discrepancies between the stories of the 2 groups. And that's the best part of this book, in my opinion. And I'm bringing this up because it's the best book that was recommended to me recently because I was watching a video from a YouTuber that I really like, Murphy Napier. And the video was books that actually lived up to the hype.
Oh.
And it's not much more complicated than that. It really lived up to the hype. It was awesome. I read this one in 2 days.
How long is the actual book?
It's about 8 hours. It's super digestible.
Okay. Yeah, that does sound digestible. It's interesting how much through the book before we get to that whodunit spot or who are these people spot. It's not a murder mystery, but you know what I mean.
It has the structure where maybe the first 25% of the book is about the journey from the UK all the way to the southern tip of Argentina. And basically introducing all the characters, all the players that will end up being important later on. And in that process, you learn so much about sailing and how you organize a journey. And it really goes into logistics of like, how much water do you need to bring on a journey like this for 6 ships, almost 2,000 sailors across 6 ships to do this journey? How much salt pork does that need? How much beer do these people need? Okay.
All the important stuff.
All the fighting that happens, like how you actually manage a crew, it really goes into the logistics of that stuff. But he's really good at balancing out learning and facts and giving context, but also telling a story. And I think he fills out the blank a little bit with some flowery prose, but it's done very tastefully, and that it doesn't feel like it's like it's disrespectful of what actually happened. And then after 25%, you get to the disaster part. Where you see the wreck, and then they end up on the island, and then the survivors kind of split up in 2 groups, and the captain ends up shooting someone in the face. And was that done as part of his duties as a captain, or was that just pure murder? Because the journey was over, and if your ship sinks, are you still a captain? And so there were like these legalistic trials happening on the island.
Legalistic trials, but do they explore like the ethics and moral side of it as well?
Oh, absolutely. And they do so in the sea logs too.
Okay.
This
actually sounds quite juicy.
It's super juicy. It's very gossipy. And when the group of 30 people that landed in Brazil, the original group of survivors, went back to the UK, one of them published a book that became really popular that detailed their story and had every reason to make themselves appear in the best light because they were mutineers.
Yeah.
There was a contradictory book that came out when the captain came back and said, no. Here's what really happened. And so like these books came out like the 1750s, 1760s. and we still don't know what really happened on
What
that
really
island.
happened? That's part of the
Yeah,
online
exactly.
community gossip as well. So, did you talked about the YouTuber who recommended this book? So I want to go back to that. Anybody else you know since then? Like, did you get into the sea of commentary around the book afterwards, or before picking it up? Because we know how much you love to research before picking up a book.
I know that a lot of people lean heavily towards one group or the other. It's very difficult to choose. And then there's a lot of people who just refuse to choose a side because it's like, who the hell knows? Because
Are you
everyone
one of
was
those
out to
people?
look, make themselves shine in the best light. I tend to lean more towards the mutineers. Oh, I say the
You
mutineers.
shouldn't have said it. Now you've
They
influenced all the
they
listeners.
did by definition commit mutiny, but the captain, like, well, sure, he was kind of following the law, but they were also in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
But how about all the
And the boat,
subtext? All the battling. Did it make a difference for you? To
I don't
change
know,
sides, I mean? Can you lean into the other side? Can you understand?
kind of. I feel like the captain was put in an impossible position and did his best
Okay.
considering everything. And so, but I want to
Yeah.
know what you think. I want you to read this one. I want to know your opinion. Are you Team Captain Chief? Are you Team
Oh,
Mutineers?
oh, here's another one. Okay. Right. You did say it was nonfiction, right?
This is nonfiction, but
Or
it
do you say it's
feels
written
like
like nonfiction?
fiction. It's written like
Okay,
nonfiction.
because of all
Well, no,
the
no. It's
yeah.
written like fiction, but is nonfiction.
Yes.
It's like right down
But
the
it feels
middle.
like fiction because of all the overwhelming drama and adventure.
Exactly. It's
Yeah,
such a
that's
good
nice.
story that it doesn't even feel real, but it is real.
I
That's the
love
crazy
that.
part.
Yeah.
What about you? What was the best recommendation that you've gotten recently?
All right. So my best recommendation that I've gotten in a while was actually here on this show. Well, sort of.
You're
Sela,
welcome.
yeah, not from you though. Sorry to say. The the Sela friends who join us, Karen McKay and Teresa Power. We did a best romance in a while kind of theme over the summer earlier this year. And after the episode, we had a really, really, really long debrief about the book that we reviewed, chatted about. It was by Carly Fortune. I can't remember the name of it right now. And then I emailed Karen McKay and I'm like, I really want to read a good romance because I feel like I'm being a jerk about romances and they're all too floofy and light, so can you please recommend me something, because I feel like we have similar taste in what you think is a good romance and what I think I would love in a good romance, something mature. And she
Okay.
recommended, yeah, I know, right, like, who do I think I am? But she did recommend me something after days of contemplation, and it was Tom Lake by Anne Patchett. It was gorgeous. Now, when she recommended it, she did caveat it by saying, this is not really just a romance. There's a lot more to this book than romance, but it plays a lot in the substance, the romantic relationships slash understanding of romance and just the realities of romance. Like, there's a lot going on in this book anyways. Flashbacks, flash forwards, storytelling, etc., etc. So romance is weaved in throughout the book, but she said, try it. And I just loved the book. Overall, it was one of the best books I've read this year. And if you had asked me before this book what the best recommendation I got in a while was, I would have said The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which we've already talked at
We've
nauseum
reviewed
about.
both of those books on this show, actually. The Invisible Life
Yes,
of Addie LaRue and Tom Lake.
Tom Lake by Anne Patchett, exactly.
Hmm.
But when I read this book, Tom Lake, I was like, please let's review it. It's so good and it's so well written. I haven't read anything by Anne Patchett since, but I'm almost scared to touch other books by her because I don't want to do a comparison between those and Tom Lake. But she's a very well loved author. And she writes about a myriad of different kinds of things. She writes very serious. She writes about like women's life and women's realities. But Tom Lake, what I loved about it is it's so poetic, man. Like it's just written in such a poetic way. Like I said, there's a lot of storytelling. It's done through the perspective of the mom of three daughters, and they live in kind of this small town. And the mom's telling us and taking us and her daughters on this journey of her life, her time at Tom Lake, her younger days romances, the love's lost and love's found, and there's just so much going on in this book, but
Well,
there's almost nothing going on at all. It's
I
so
think
nice.
the hook for the book is pretty good. It's basically three daughters going back home during the pandemic, and while they're there, their
Yep,
mother
yep.
tells them about a love affair she had when she was younger with
With a
somebody who
famous
then later
actor.
turned on to be a famous actor. And naturally, the three
Yes.
girls are like, "Excuse me, mom, how did that happen?" But
You had a
it's
life?
it,
Yeah.
is this. It sounds like a corny setup for a romance book.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing is that she doesn't end up with him. She
No.
ends up having
No, she
her three
picked a like a
daughters with
very
another
safe
man,
choice.
a
Yeah.
very safe, kind of
Yeah.
unexciting guy that's like clearly a good dude. What I
Mm-hmm.
remember from that book is that the three daughters, even though it's a relatively short book, have such great characterization. All three of them, despite being sisters, are
Wonderfully.
very different and
Mm-hmm.
drive the story in different ways. And they all kind of represent different aspects of the mother's character generally.
Yes.
Fantastic
Yes.
book.
And different aspects of family, like what makes a family dynamic. There's the characters who understand the mom, and then the characters who are like, I don't believe a thing you're saying, mother. Like, who do you think you are? Or I
Mm.
can't believe that you're leaving things out of the story. This can't be the full
Right.
thing.
It's so cool because the book is telling us the story of this love affair when she was
Yep.
younger, but it's also the story of the daughters being told the same story and their
Exactly.
reactions to it. And all three daughters pull different things from it because they've had different
Exactly.
experiences of
Yeah.
life up to this point.
And it's so personal. There are parts where we know that the mother has left
Mhm.
out parts of the story, but the daughters don't. So there's navigating around that. Like, how much do even the closest people know about you? It just takes you in all these directions. If you want to take it in philosophically, it is, very cerebral, but also just the storytelling is beautiful. The experiences of the characters are epic. There's a lot of great conflict in the book. It moves along quite well. Like, we get the present life and the past life. We get generational relationship dynamics as well, because you get to hear a little bit about the mother's past with her. Was it her grandma that she used to live with? And yeah, I would say overall, just lovely representation of real life relationships and family dynamics. So it was good. And it was released, like you said, it was written around the pandemic time, experience around the pandemic. But it was written in or published in 2023.
One of those books that I enjoyed at the time, but with I think I've read this about 4 or 5 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
I I recall it better than I did. Like I think about it very fondly. So
Yeah.
it's marinated nicely,
Yeah.
like a nice wine.
Who was it who narrated this book? She killed it.
Yeah, the narration was fantastic. It was
Oh my,
some
it was
old
a famous
lady.
actress. I'm gonna pull
It
it
was
up.
it was a famous
Yeah.
actress. Yeah, you want to pull
So
that up real
good.
quick? Okay, while
So
you do
good.
that, I'm gonna present the next theme for this themed prompt for recommendations. The next one we're doing is the tearjerker I need to tell you about. When you're talking about crying to a book, I don't know about you, Rams, but I don't know if you'll make fun of me for this.
No, I won't.
I've never cried while reading a book, but I do go through passages that I go, this is probably the time where I would cry.
Sorry, that's what you're gonna start with. That's the statement. I've never cried while reading a book.
I'm
But you
guessing
go
you have.
through. I could count on one hand the amount of times I haven't cried while reading a book. I'm always crying while reading
You're just
books.
easily swayed. Honestly, I
Okay.
respect that. That doesn't mean that I don't
Excuse
recognize
me.
emotional
You can't make
moments.
fun
Like
of me for my
I
reactions
have
either.
paused books and gone, "Oh, that's deep. Ooh, that hit
Have
me
you
hard."
paused it? Like, you paused the
I've paused
book?
it. Literally
All
paused the
right.
book. Yeah.
Okay.
That. Yeah. Did you
Fine.
find the narrator?
Meryl Streep, by the way. Yes,
Meryl
Meryl
Streep.
Streep.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
good. Killer.
absolutely. Yeah,
Give
she
her
was
an Audie.
awesome.
Oh my gosh, it was amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's Tom Lake by Ann Patchett, narrated by Meryl Streep. That was a
Mm-hmm.
killer book.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, do you want to go first for this one? Well, what's the book that got you
Oh. Is that
teary?
because you think that it's a sufficient answer to say I don't cry while reading?
No, no, no. I have a recommendation. Just
Fine. Okay.
I have one in mind.
Can't get away. Okay. So the book that you said passages, so I'll say the same thing. Like random excerpts during this book made me so feel so vulnerable and sad. And I think I've talked about this book slightly before. It's called Normal People by Sally Rooney.
Oh yeah, that's a popular one.
It's a nice book. And you can tell, like the books that I choose are always around this human condition and relationships, and I don't know. It deeply provokes me into emotional reactions to have books written so well around character dynamics and character relationships, especially when it's family, but not necessarily just family dynamics. And Normal People by Sally Rooney was something that I was like, what is going on? Like, why am I crying so much during this book? and Okay, one thing is that it skips through timelines, right? So there's these two people. It's an Irish writer. Sally Rooney's an Irish writer, and it's written around Ireland and surrounding areas. And so the thing that I wanted to say was it skips through timelines of these two people who meet around high school. They try to get together, but it's such a lopsided relationship slash dynamic. You know, the girl's really into it. She's not sure. The guy's too popular. Then they kind of sever and separate, then meet again during post-secondary studies. And now the girl's beautiful and popular and has so many friends, whereas the guy, like, he kind of peaked in high school and he's like, okay, let's just be friends then, sure. And then they skip through again and they're kind of young adults. There's a lot of other things going on that have affected their lives individually that they have to then navigate and come together on, or frustratingly fight about. And I'm in the end, spoiler alert, I guess, you don't really get to know what happens with these characters. Do they end up together? Does it work out? Does it not? There's no happy ending, and there's not really a cliffhanger either. It's just kind of do with this what you will.
Well,
So
that's
it's almost
unsatisfying.
does
5 minutes left, guys.
But I loved it. I loved the almost as you said in the quote at the start of this. I just had to be present in it without thinking what's going to happen. What's going to happen with these guys? Because that's not what Sally Rooney was trying to navigate. She wasn't trying to explore that. She was just exploring these snippets, these time lapses of what these characters are going through. And you don't really get a lot of other characters, by the way, in this book. It's very, not solely, but close enough to solely focused on these two characters. And it's done so well.
So you don't really know why it did it for you emotionally, why it made you cry.
But it did. It made me sad.
Do you have a guess? Do you have a guess?
I think
just
I
the feel? Is it just because it felt so
it
real
felt
that it was
almost
reflective?
hopeless, but optimistic. Like, I don't know if it's gonna work out between you guys. Oh, it's never the right time. Ugh, this sucks. But you'll do it. Like, there's something deep within the connection of these characters, and I really badly want it to work out. But honestly, what I think it is she took us to very vulnerable places. She took us to what made these characters who are so proud. Okay, most of the time you get a lot of pride out of one or the other character depending on who was facing what. And then based on that, the situations felt uncomfortable and mean or sad. Like, she just took us to these very vulnerable places in the book that I loved. I want to reread it now that I'm talking about it.
Don't make you
But I
cry.
don't want to cry about it. Yeah. Okay, were you going to pick a passage or a recommendation?
Yeah, my recommendation for a book that'll hit you right in the feels is actually a fantasy series, the Farseer series by Robin Hobb. And this one follows, it's a trilogy. It follows the bastard son of a king that recuses himself, and he's put in a very uncomfortable position politically. And while the plot is fairly slow, it's very character driven and really makes you feel for Fitz, who's the main character. And these are 3 very long books that only have one point of view, which is kind of unusual for a fantasy series. And so you really get to know this poor kid that's forced to make ridiculous decisions that affect tons of people, and it really affects him emotionally. You understand him as a character so much. To give you an idea of how emotional this book is, it gives you a good preview of what you're gonna get because a dog dies in the first chapter.
No, dude.
Yeah,
Just
and
dogdie.com or whatever.
yeah, there's another scene, and this is
You
I
ripped
think it's
that
in the
band-aid off quick. Now I'm gonna cry just for that.
well, it's in the first
All right.
chapter. I think Robin Hood is weeding out the weaklings if you don't want to make it
Are
through.
you serious? You're just saying a lot of controversial stuff right now.
In the
Okay.
second book, had one of the best passages I've ever read, and I'm dead serious about this. Fitz has a partner called Molly, and they have very difficult conversations because Fitz is being trained to become an assassin, and naturally, that's a very difficult thing to tell your partner that you're an assassin. She doesn't take it very well, and there, it's revealed that when Molly was younger, she would get bullied because her dad was a drunk and a loser with a horrible job, and that she would one day end up with a drunk and a loser who has a horrible job. And she realizes in the moment that they have that fight after it's revealed that trained to become an assassin, and he's also kind of an alcoholic himself, she realizes, oh my God,
History repeats itself.
all my bullies were right. And the way it's written hit me in the feels like more than
No
any other book I've
way.
ever read. And with that, Rams, I think we should recap the books they were recommending.
Okay.
For a book, what was the first prompt?
The first prompt was the best recommendation I've gotten in a while.
Yeah, and that one for me is The Wager by David Graham. That's the one about shipwreck and mutiny. What was the one for you?
It was Tom Lake by Ann Patchett and narrated by Meryl Streep.
And for a book that hit me right in the feels, that was the Farseer series by Robin Hobb. And for you, that was Tom Lake by Ann Patchett.
That was Normal People by Sally Rooney. And
Right.
Tearjerker for those of us who actually
Tearjerker.
cry,
Yeah,
who
that's
know
right.
how to get in our feels properly.
Shout out to Tom Lake, though.
Yep, twice.
That's all the time we have for AMI Audiobook Review. Remember, you can find a repeat of AMI Audiobook Review as part of AMI Today on AMI Audio every 6 hours. The show is also available on your favorite podcast platforms, and it includes YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. It makes a big difference. Leave us a comment by all means. We'll probably include you in an upcoming episode. I was with Ramya Amuthan. I'm Jacob Shymanski. Have a good one.